The stars went out one by one, like candles being pinched between invisible fingers. Lieutenant Kira Patel stood at the main viewport of Global Defense Command, watching as patches of darkness spread across the night sky over Mumbai. She'd spent 15 years training for first contact, but nothing had prepared her for this. Silence. "Ma'am, we've lost contact with the Bangalore array," Technical Officer Raj Sharma reported, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "That's the 7th satellite cluster to go dark in the last hour." Kira nodded, her reflection in the reinforced glass showing none of the fear churning in her stomach. At 42, she'd earned her position through decades of preparation for exactly this scenario. But all those simulations, all those contingency plans, they'd always assumed the aliens would make noise. The Meridian Fleet, as they dubbed themselves in their first and only transmission, had appeared 3 days ago. Their ships were beautiful in a terrifying way, curved structures of what looked like liquid metal, constantly shifting and flowing, but never making a sound. No engine noise, no atmospheric disruption, nothing. They'd positioned themselves in a perfect geodesic pattern around Earth, and then they'd started their work. "Status report on the Quantum Communication Network?" Kira asked, turning to face the command center. The room was a hive of activity, but something was off about it. The usual cacophony of keyboards, voices, and equipment had been replaced by an unnatural hush, as if sound itself was being stripped away layer by layer. "It's..." Raj paused, frowning at his holographic display. "It's still functioning, but the bandwidth is degrading. Whatever they're doing, it's affecting everything that generates or transmits waves, electromagnetic, quantum, even sound itself." A soft chime, one of the few sounds still working, drew their attention to the main screen. Director Thomas Way's face appeared, his usual composed expression showing cracks of concern. "Lieutenant Patel, we're receiving reports from New York. The silence has reached street level." Kira's blood ran cold. Until now, the effect had been limited to high technology and upper atmosphere phenomena. Casualties? None yet, but... The director's image flickered. "People are reporting a complete absence of sound in affected areas. No traffic noise, no voices, nothing. It's as if..." The feed cut out. "Get him back," Kira ordered, but she already knew it was futile. The Meridians were methodically stripping away humanity's ability to communicate, to coordinate, to fight back. But why? Why silence? The answer came 48 hours later, in the worst possible way. Kira was reviewing evacuation protocols when first contact finally happened. The Meridian representative simply appeared in the command center, like a ripple in reality that took humanoid form. It was tall, easily 3 meters, with a surface like flowing mercury that never settled into a fixed shape. Every person in the room reached for their weapons, but Kira held up her hand. "Hold your fire," she commanded, stepping forward. "I am Lieutenant Kira Patel of Earth's Global Defense Command. We've been trying to establish communication." The being's surface rippled, and a sound emerged that made everyone in the room cover their ears in pain. It wasn't loud. It was wrong, fundamentally wrong, like the audio equivalent of seeing a color that shouldn't exist. When Kira lowered her hands, she realized with horror that every piece of technology in the room had gone dark. The being's surface formed what might have been a face, and words emerged, not spoken but somehow pressed directly into their minds. "Your species is too loud," it communicated. "Your technology, your voices, your very thoughts, they pollute the cosmic harmony. We are the Meridians, and we have come to silence Earth." "Why?" Kira demanded, fighting against the unnatural quiet pressing in around them. "We have a right to exist, to communicate, to..." "You do not understand," the being interrupted. "Your planet occupies a crucial node in the galaxy's resonance pattern. Your noise disrupts everything. We tried to do this gradually, humanely, but you resist. Now we must demonstrate why silence is necessary." The being raised what might have been an arm, and a wave of absolute silence swept out from its position. Kira watched in horror as the effect spread like a visible tide through the building. Where it passed, people clutched their throats, trying to scream but producing no sound. Equipment died. The very air seemed to thicken and still. But in that moment of terror, Kira noticed something crucial. When the silence wave passed over an ancient brass bell mounted on the wall, a relic from the command center's early days, the bell vibrated. Not from being struck, but from some kind of resonance with the silence itself. The Meridian didn't notice her observation, too focused on its demonstration of power. This is merely a taste, it projected into their minds. Your entire civilization will be silenced. It is necessary. It is mercy. As the being vanished and emergency protocols kicked in, Kira's mind was already racing. The bell had reacted. Sound wasn't being eliminated. It was being transformed. And in that realization, she glimpsed humanity's first real hope of fighting back. But first, they had to survive the silence. Within hours, the effect had spread to every major city on Earth. Modern civilization, built on a foundation of electronic communication and digital technology, began to crumble. But as Kira would soon discover, humanity's oldest technologies and some of its oldest secrets were about to become their most powerful weapons. The silence had begun, but Earth's response would be anything but quiet. Professor James Blackwood hadn't left his underground acoustics laboratory at Oxford University in 6 days. Not since the silence had descended over England like a suffocating blanket. The world above had descended into chaos as modern civilization struggled to function without electronic communication. But down here, surrounded by centuries-old tuning forks and resonance chambers, he'd made a discovery that could change everything. "It's not silence at all," he muttered to himself, watching as another tuning fork vibrated spontaneously in response to the Meridian effect. His voice sounded strange, muffled and distant, but at least sound still existed in his reinforced chamber. "They're shifting our frequencies out of phase with something." The door to his lab creaked open, and he spun to see Lieutenant Kira Patel entering with 2 others, a woman in her 60s wearing the remnants of a symphony conductor's outfit, and a young man carrying what looked like ancient Native American drums. "Professor Blackwood," Kira said, her voice barely audible despite the room's acoustic design. "Your message got through to us. Something about harmonics?" James nodded eagerly, gesturing to his array of equipment. "The Meridians aren't destroying sound, they're shifting it. Everything on Earth vibrates at certain frequencies. Our technology, our voices, even our brain waves. They found a way to push those frequencies out of alignment with what they call cosmic harmony." The conductor stepped forward, her eyes sharp with interest. "Dr. Marina Volkov," she introduced herself, "former conductor of the London Symphony Orchestra and theoretical physicist. I've been noticing something similar with my instruments. The ones built with modern materials are dead, but the older ones still resonate," James finished excitedly. "Exactly. And look at this." He grabbed a brass tuning fork from 1876 and held it near a section of wall where the Meridian effect was strongest. The fork began to vibrate, producing a clear, pure tone that seemed to push back against the unnatural silence. The young man with the drums set them down carefully. "Aaron Red Cloud," he said. "My grandmother was keeper of our tribe's sacred drums. When everything went silent, these were among the few instruments that still worked. She said they were voiced to the Earth's heartbeat." Kira moved closer to the tuning fork, her military bearing softening with wonder. "How is this possible?" "These older instruments," James explained, "they weren't just built, they were voiced to natural harmonics. The materials, the craftsmanship, even the intent behind their creation. It all aligned them with frequencies that existed long before modern technology. Frequencies the Meridians can't silence because they're fundamental to Earth itself." Marina picked up a Baroque-era violin from James's collection. The Meridian said Earth was a crucial node in some kind of galactic resonance pattern. What if that's literally true? What if our planet has a natural frequency, and these old instruments are tuned to it? "More than that," Aaron added, laying his hand on one of the drums. "Every culture has stories about sound being used to shape reality. The Aboriginal didgeridoo, Tibetan singing bowls, Native American drums, they all talk about frequencies that could heal, harm, or even move mountains." Kira's eyes lit up with the first real hope James had seen since she arrived. "Can we weaponize this?" James hesitated. "Maybe, but we'd need more than just a few old instruments. We'd need to understand the exact frequencies the Meridians are using, find their resonant points, and a sudden vibration shook the lab, different from the usual tremors they'd been feeling. Aaron's drums began to vibrate on their own, and Marina's violin strings hummed without being touched. Above them, through layers of concrete and earth, they heard something new, a deep, penetrating tone that seemed to come from the planet itself. "They're escalating," Kira said grimly. Moving to the next phase of their plan, James rushed to his instruments, taking rapid readings. These readings, they're trying to shift the Earth's fundamental frequency. If they succeed, everything dies, Marina finished, her face pale. Without our natural resonance, every living thing on Earth would essentially stop being in harmony with existence itself. "Then we don't have much time," Aaron said, pulling something from his bag. Ancient sheet music covered in strange symbols. "My grandmother gave me these before the silence hit. She said they were songs of power, passed down through generations. Songs that could wake the Earth itself." Kira took charge, her military training kicking in. "Professor, how quickly can you analyze those frequencies and replicate them?" "Dr. Volkov, we'll need your expertise in coordinating multiple instruments." "Aaron, those drums might be our prototype weapons. We need to move fast. The Meridians think they've silenced us, but they're about to learn that humanity's voice goes deeper than they could possibly imagine." As they worked through the night, combining ancient wisdom with modern acoustical science, the lab became a strange symphony of old and new. Tuning forks resonated with tribal drums, Baroque instruments harmonized with quantum frequency meters, and slowly, a plan began to take shape. But they weren't alone in their discovery. Across the world, others were finding their own connections to Earth's fundamental songs. In Tibet, monks discovered their ancient singing bowls could disrupt meridian energy fields. In Australia, Aboriginal elders used didgeridoos to create safe zones where technology still functioned. In Peru, ancient whistles thought to be toys were revealed as tools that could pierce the silence. The Meridians had wanted to silence humanity to preserve their cosmic harmony. Instead, they had forced humanity to rediscover its oldest music, its deepest connections to the planet's own voice. And that voice was about to rise in a war cry that would shake the stars themselves. As dawn approached, James looked at the unlikely group assembled in his lab. A military officer, a conductor, a keeper of ancient wisdom, and himself, a man who had spent his life studying the science of sound. Together, they represented humanity's best hope, the bridge between ancient knowledge and modern understanding, between science and spirit, between silence and song. "We need to move," Kira announced, checking her watch, one of the few pieces of technology simple enough to still function. "The Meridians will detect any large-scale testing. We need to coordinate with other groups, develop our weapons, and prepare for a synchronized strike." As they packed up their instruments and findings, the deep vibration from above intensified. The Earth was crying out, and time was running out to answer its call. But for the first time since the stars began going dark, humanity had a chance to fight back. Not with bullets or bombs, but with the very frequencies of existence itself. The war for Earth's symphony was about to begin. The abandoned Royal Albert Hall stood like a ghost of music past, its magnificent dome now serving as the unlikely headquarters for humanity's sonic resistance. 3 weeks had passed since the discovery in Oxford, and the world had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Lieutenant Kira Patel stood at the center of the stage, surrounded by what looked like a medieval orchestra meets tribal gathering. Hundreds of people from across the globe had smuggled ancient instruments through the silence zones: Vietnamese dan bos, African talking drums, Persian santours, and dozens of others. Each one represented a piece of humanity's musical heritage, and each had proven capable of disrupting the meridian effect. "The first test runs are complete," Professor Blackwood announced, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's perfect acoustics. He gestured to a complex arrangement of tuning forks and crystals. "We've identified 7 fundamental frequencies that exist in almost every ancient instrument. When played in specific combinations, they create what we're calling resonance points." Dr. Marina Volkov stepped forward, her conductor's baton now serving a far more crucial purpose than keeping time. "The Earth itself resonates at approximately 7.83 Hz, the Schumann resonance. The meridians are trying to shift this frequency, but our ancient instruments naturally align with it. It's as if our ancestors knew this day would come. A deep boom echoed through the hall as Aaron Redcloud tested one of his modified drums. The sound rippled visibly through the air, creating a bubble where the oppressive meridian silence couldn't penetrate. "The drums are ready," he reported. "We've fitted them with the crystalline amplifiers. One drum can now create a safe zone about 50 meters in diameter." Kira nodded, checking the ancient star charts they'd recovered from observatories worldwide. The meridians position themselves at specific points around Earth, creating their own resonance grid. If we can disrupt enough points simultaneously, we create discord in their network, Marina finished. But timing will be crucial. We need perfect synchronization across all resistance points. The planning room behind the stage had become a war room unlike any in history. Instead of military maps, they had musical scores. Instead of weapons caches, they had instrument repositories. Teams of physicists worked alongside musicians, mathematicians collaborated with mystics, and slowly, a symphony of war took shape. "First contact team, report," Kira commanded. A young woman stepped forward, carrying what looked like a modified theremin. "We've established that the meridians themselves have a resonant frequency. They're not just using sound, they're made of it. Their liquid metal forms are actually standing waves of matter, held together by specific harmonics." This was the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. If the meridians were living sound waves, they could be disrupted by counter-frequencies. But the implications went deeper. "They're not here to silence us," Professor Blackwood realized, his eyes wide. "They're here because they're afraid of us. Earth's natural frequency? The one they're trying to shift. It's exactly the resonance that could tear their civilization apart." The revelation sent a murmur through the gathered resistance. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their planet's very voice in the cosmic symphony. The first test of their sonic weapons came sooner than expected. A Meridian scout ship descended over London, its silence field expanding like a smothering blanket. But this time, humanity was ready. Aaron took position with his modified drums, surrounded by a circle of musicians with instruments spanning human history. Marina raised her baton, now fitted with crystals that glowed in response to sonic energies. "Remember," Kira instructed, "we start with the base frequency, Earth's own voice. Then we build the harmonics layer by layer. Everything must be precise." The Meridian ship hung above them, a twisted sculpture of liquid metal that seemed to drink in all sound. But as the first notes rose from the ancient instruments, something extraordinary happened. The ship's surface began to ripple, its perfect forms distorting. Aaron's drums provided the foundation, a deep thrumming that matched Earth's heartbeat. Marina conducted the other instruments in perfect sequence. Chinese bianzhong bells singing harmonics unchanged for thousands of years, Australian didgeridoos adding layers of Earth frequencies, Persian santours weaving complex patterns of sound that seemed to cut through the silence like knives. The Meridian vessel's silence field flickered, then collapsed. The ship itself began to lose cohesion, its liquid metal surface vibrating in sympathy with the human instruments. In a final crescendo, the combined frequencies reached a critical resonance, and the scout ship dissolved into a shower of inert metallic rain. The victory was small but significant. For the first time, humanity had proof they could fight back. But the real battle was yet to come. "They'll adapt," Professor Blackwood warned as they studied readings from the encounter. "We need to be ready with counter-adaptations." "This is just the beginning." Kira looked out over the gathered resistance, seeing hope replace fear in their eyes. They had started as a desperate group of survivors, but they had become something more, an orchestra of war, preparing to play Earth's song against those who would silence it. Messages began arriving from other resistance cells worldwide. In China, ancient temples had become sonic fortresses. In Egypt, pyramids were being used as resonance chambers. In South America, high mountain valleys amplified their ancient instruments to create vast safe zones. "The Meridians thought they could silence us," Kira addressed the gathered crowd. "Instead, they forced us to remember our oldest songs, our deepest connections to this planet. When we strike, we won't just be fighting with sound. We'll be fighting with the accumulated musical wisdom of every culture on Earth. As if in response to her words, a deep vibration ran through the hall. The Meridians were increasing their efforts to shift Earth's frequency. The final battle was approaching, and it would determine whether humanity's voice would be silenced forever, or rise in a symphony that would shake the stars themselves. The resistance had found its rhythm. Now it was time to orchestrate their counterattack. The day Earth fought back began with a song. Across every continent, in precisely calculated locations, humanity's resistance emerged from their hidden sanctuaries. The Meridian ships hung in the sky like frozen mercury, their silence fields creating dead zones that had expanded to cover nearly 60% of the planet's surface. But today, those zones would meet something they couldn't silence: the combined musical heritage of an entire world. Lieutenant Kira Patel stood atop the Royal Albert Hall's dome, surrounded by an array of instruments that spanned human history. Professor Blackwood's latest readings showed the Meridians were hours away from achieving their frequency shift. If they succeeded, Earth's fundamental resonance would change forever, ending all life as they knew it. All stations, report in, Kira commanded, using one of Aaron's drums to send the message through the silence. The responses came back in waves of sound, each region using their traditional instruments to signal readiness. From Tibet, the deep throat singing of monks, amplified by ancient temples. From Australia, the cosmic drone of didgeridoos, echoing through the outback. From Africa, a complex rhythm of talking drums, carrying messages across continents. From the Americas, whistling vessels and ceremonial drums, their frequencies aligned with Earth's pulse. From Europe, church bells and alpine horns, their pure tones cutting through the silence. Dr. Marina Volkov had mapped out the attack with the precision of a symphony. The Meridians create their silence field through a network of harmonic nodes, she explained, pointing to a crystalline display that showed sonic wavelengths. We need to strike all nodes simultaneously, using counter frequencies that match Earth's natural resonance. But as they prepared to launch their attack, something unexpected happened. The Meridian ships began to move, realigning themselves in a new pattern. The silence deepened, becoming almost solid. They know, Professor Blackwood realized, checking his instruments. They've detected our preparations. They're creating a defensive harmony. Above them, the sky turned to liquid metal as hundreds of Meridian ships merged into a vast, geometric web. A voice pressed into their minds, the same consciousness that had announced Earth's silencing weeks ago. Your resistance is futile, it resonated. We have studied your sonic weapons. We have adapted. Your planet's voice must be silenced for the greater harmony of the galaxy. But there was something different in the voice, something that made Kira pause. You're afraid, she realized. Not of our weapons, but of something else. Something about Earth itself. The Meridian consciousness rippled. Your planet, its frequency is a chaos note in the galaxy's song. If left unchecked, its resonance will spread, corrupting the great harmony we have maintained for millions of years. Aaron stepped forward, his hands resting on his ancestral drums. You're wrong, he said simply. Earth's song isn't chaos, it's evolution. Change. Growth. The very things your static harmony fears. Understanding dawned across the resistance. The Meridians weren't villains. They were preservationists, desperately trying to maintain what they saw as cosmic perfection. Earth's dynamic, ever-changing frequencies threatened their unchanging symphony. Now, Kira commanded, and humanity's counterattack began. It started with the drums, thousands of them, across every continent, beating in perfect synchronization with Earth's pulse. Then came the overtones, Tibetan singing bowls, their frequencies spiraling up into the stratosphere. Australian didgeridoos added their ancient voice, while alpine horns sent pure notes bouncing off mountain peaks. The Meridian web shuddered, its perfect geometry distorting. But instead of breaking apart, it began to adapt, shifting to absorb the frequencies. The silence deepened again. Secondary harmony. Marina called out, raising her conductor's baton. Church bells rang out across Europe, their bronze voices carrying centuries of Earth's music. Persian centaurs added layers of complexity, while Chinese bianzhong bells contributed their perfect mathematical tones. The battle transformed into something beyond war. It became a duel of frequencies, a clash between static perfection and dynamic evolution. The meridian web would adapt to each new harmony, only to face another and another, each one carrying a different aspect of Earth's voice. But it wasn't enough. The web held, and the silence continued to deepen. Final phase, Professor Blackwood announced grimly. We need the chaos note. This was the moment they'd prepared for but hoped to avoid. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, in carefully chosen locations, teams had placed resonators tuned to Earth's deepest frequency. Not the surface rhythm they'd been using, but the planet's core resonance, a sound so profound it could shake continents. If we do this, Marina warned, there's no going back. We'll be changing Earth's song forever. Kira looked up at the meridian web, then at the gathered resistance. Musicians, scientists, keepers of ancient wisdom, all united in Earth's defense. Our planet's song has always been about change, she said. That's what they fear, and that's what makes us strong. She raised her hand, and across the world, the resonators activated. The effect was beyond anything they'd prepared for. The sound that rose from Earth's core wasn't just a note. It was the voice of a living planet, a frequency that carried billions of years of evolution and change. It rose through the crust in waves of pure acoustic energy, amplified by every instrument, every voice, every grain of sand on Earth. The meridian web sparked with anomalous energies as it tried to adapt, but this wasn't a frequency that could be silenced or changed. It was change itself, the very thing the meridians had tried to prevent, expressed as pure sound. Their perfect geometry began to fracture, not from destruction but from transformation. The liquid metal of their ships started to flow in new patterns, responding to rhythms they had never allowed themselves to hear. In that moment of crisis, something remarkable happened. Some of the meridians, instead of fighting the change, began to harmonize with it. Their static perfection gave way to something new, a dynamic harmony that embraced evolution rather than fearing it. The sky above Earth became a symphony of transformation, as ancient songs met alien harmonies, and something entirely new was born. The day Earth fought back didn't end in victory or defeat. It ended in evolution, just as it always had. The silence was broken not by war, but by the birth of a new song. 3 months after the day Earth's song changed the universe, Lieutenant Kira Patel stood in the newly established Harmonic Council chamber beneath the Royal Albert Hall. The room was a perfect acoustic sphere, its walls lined with crystalline resonators that hummed with both Earth's natural frequency and the new harmonies that now filled their world. The meridian representative no longer appeared as liquid metal, but as a shimmering pattern of visible sound waves that danced in time with Earth's pulse. The transformation that had begun during the final battle had spread through their entire civilization, changing them from preservers of static harmony to explorers of dynamic resonance. The galaxy sings differently now, the meridian communicated, its thoughts carried on waves of pure tone rather than imposed silence. Many worlds that were once locked in perfect harmony have begun to find their own voices. It is beautiful, in ways we never understood before. Professor Blackwood nodded, adjusting one of the crystalline monitors that tracked the new frequencies emanating from Earth's core. The change hasn't just affected your people, he said. Humanity is evolving too. Our sensitivity to sound, our ability to perceive and manipulate frequencies, it's expanding beyond anything we thought possible. He was right. Across the planet, children were being born with an innate ability to hear the music of the spheres. Adults found themselves developing new sensitivities, able to feel the subtle harmonies that connected all living things. The ancient wisdom that had helped them survive was becoming part of human biology itself. Dr. Marina Volkov, now head of the Earth Frequency Institute, stepped forward with her latest findings. The resonance patterns we created during the battle have stabilized into something extraordinary, she explained. Earth isn't just broadcasting its own frequency anymore. It's becoming a harmonic nexus, a place where different cosmic songs can meet and merge.